medical sleep disorder is defined as waking up more than 3 times a week and lying awake for more than half an hour every night. And on the other hand, if you're not sleeping 7 to 8 hours per night, you are sleep deprived.
Hi and welcome to Lead Well.
Today in Lead Well, we'll talk about sleep. Now, how about your last night? Did you fall asleep right after going to bed? Did you sleep through the night and got up after 7 to 8 hours of good sleep, feeling fully rested and energized? If not, you're not alone. Sleep quality issues and lack of sleep are prevalent. There was a recent study saying that almost 6 out of 10 German managers can't sleep well. And 30% of adults in a US study said they have symptoms of insomnia. And for 10% of them, it's so bad that it impacts their daily lives. If you think about it, not sleeping well, having sleep deprivation, I think it's really also a cultural issue because you're considered great, very engaged, very productive if you're not sleeping a lot. So it's something that the culture almost requires of us. But the truth is, medical sleep disorder is defined as waking up more than 3 times a week and lying awake for more than half an hour every night. And on the other hand, if you're not sleeping 7 to 8 hours per night, you are sleep deprived because that's the number of hours our body needs. And yes, you might tell me, Christine, I don't need that much. I am okay with 4, 5, 6 hours. And I would say, be careful because research shows that people having less than 7 to 8 hours of sleep already show signs of sleep deprivation. And it's a bit similar to drinking. So if you had a drink of alcohol, you probably think you are still okay and fully aware and fully able to do whatever you need to do. And with sleep, it's about the same thing. You don't notice it as much. But yes, research shows that there is already an impact. So sleep is really important because if you do not get enough sleep, there are different effects of that. It can lead to excessive daytime sleepiness. And this can get really, really dangerous. Think about drivers falling asleep. The assumption is that a lot of car accidents are due to sleep deprivation. What else happens when we do not get the 7 to 8 hours sleep per night? Our mood changes. We get more irritable. We get more anxious. We lack motivation. And it can also foster depression. Scientists still are not sure whether a depression is caused by sleep deprivation or a lack of sleep is the result of a depression. But it's really interlaced there. And of course, poor performance, because once you're tired, you cannot concentrate as much. Once you're tired, you cannot pay attention as much. And your reaction time also gets longer. There is also this restlessness, people always needing to do something, always kind of very, very active and reactive. That can also be a sign of sleep deprivation. And of course, also poor coordination, as well as forgetfulness and increased errors. All of this are results of sleep deprivation. And of course, over time, it also has an impact on our health with high blood pressure, even obesity. So eating too much because not only because you're awake more hours, but this mechanism of ghrelin and leptin, which is regulating our hunger, is disturbed by a lack of sleep. And again, sleep deprivation has really been associated with an increased risk of death, not only through accidents, but also through impact on our bodies. Now, why are we all so sleep deprived? And I say we because, yes, I need to pay attention a lot to getting enough sleep
Because I am used to doing work at night. Because I used to work a lot with the US, I was used to working late hours. And this is just a habit. This really is voluntary behavior because we decide that we will read, we will look at our devices, we will do work in the evening. And that really can already be enough for us to not getting enough sleep. And as we heard, this is not really good for us. On the other hand, personal obligations. If you have young children, if you have elderly parents at home that you have to take care of course, that will inhibit a regular sleep rhythm or working hours. If you're a shift worker, maybe even like in my case, working with different time zones, I had to adjust to that. I needed to make sure that I could interact with my colleagues who were on the West Coast in America on one hand and in Australia on the other hand. So again, work hours can absolutely have an impact. And then, of course, there are also the medical problems. There are some chronic diseases. There are some ongoing sleep disorders. One that is probably the most frequent one is sleep apnea. So, sleep apnea is when, especially people who are snoring, stop breathing while they're sleeping. And so, there is an estimation of between 9 to 38% of the general population being affected by that. And it's not a minor issue. It's really something that if you think you are suffering from that, you absolutely need to go to the doctor. Sleep is absolutely important to us. Now, what happens when we're sleeping? In the mid 19th century, the first scientists have started looking into sleep and how we dream. I hadn't thought about it that when you want to study dreams, the only way you could do it at that time is have someone sit next to a patient and wake that person up on a regular basis. And based on what they reported, you could then determine, were they dreaming? Were they not dreaming? What type of dreams they have? Only when we had the opportunity to have electroencephalograms, scientists could actually track what's going on in our brain. Before that, they could only wake up people and ask them about it. And the one thing that is interesting, because nowadays we think it's very common that we go to sleep and then we sleep through for 7 or 8 hours and then we wake up again. When looking at early literature, even from the medieval times, they always talked about biphasic sleep. People would go to bed when it was getting dark. They would fall asleep. And then usually, as literature says, usually they would wake up around 1 o'clock and stay awake for an hour or maybe even more. And then they would get to sleep again after that and then wake up at sunrise. So biphasic sleep seems to be what humans would do if we had no artificial lights. I found that really interesting. I hadn't known that. Now, what makes us sleepy at night? There are two factors. The one factor is the circadian rhythm. This circadian rhythm determines when we feel sleepy and when we want to get up. You probably have heard talk about night owls, people that are usually getting to bed really late and then getting up very late as well. And I consider myself one of those. Then there are the early birds that are going to sleep really early and also getting up really early. And unfortunately, my husband is one of those. And then there are the so-called bears in between. The bears are the ones that can adjust more easily. Those are the different types. And this is determined by the circadian rhythm. And this, by the way, is what you're born with. So there is not a lot of influence on that. Yes, you can establish habits, but this natural inclination will always be there. Now, the other thing that happens is that the longer we're exposed to daylight, the longer we're exposed to natural sunlight, the more our body produces a hormone called adenosine. And the more of it we have in our bodies, the more tired we get. And so there are these two factors. And by the way, we will look into what you can do to better your sleep in the next two episodes. Today, I wanted to focus a bit on the physiology and also the pathology of sleep. So let's talk about the sleep phases for a moment. Because when we sleep, we have different phases. And I'm pretty sure you already heard about that. So more or less, there are two distinct phases. The first one is called the REM sleep, so REM sleep. And the other phase is called the non-REM sleep or NREM sleep. Now let's talk about REM sleep first, because REM sleep is pretty interesting. REM sleep, it's called that way because REM is an acronym for rapid eye movement. So what happens in that period of sleep is that our eyes start moving pretty quickly. And believe it or not, scientists so far have no idea why that happens and how it happens. An interesting thing is that all other muscles, the muscles in our body, are completely atonic, so they cannot move. Actually, in the REM phase, there is something happening in our spine, and our muscles are detached from our brain. So whatever's going on in our brain is not affecting our muscles. And that's actually a great thing because in the REM phase, we dream. And so think about it. If everything that you would be dreaming about, you could act upon, that wouldn't be a good thing. That's why sleepwalkers, for example, that's where this detachment of the muscles from the brain is not working correctly. So that's why it happens that they start act out on their dreams. And naturally, we cannot do that. This, by the way, also means, because I'm also interested in sleep for horses and other animals, that's why every animal has to lie down to sleep, because muscle atonia means that they have no muscle tension, so they cannot stand up. Even horses, there is still this myth around that horses can sleep standing up. And yes, they can when we look at the non-REM sleep, but REM sleep, they can't because of this muscle atonia. And it's the same for all mammals, for all animals, with one exception, and that's dolphins, whales, and some bird species, because they sleep with only one hemisphere at a time. So they're always half awake, and they are the only animals that can do that. So this is another really interesting fact about sleep. Now, we talked about REM, and in the REM sleep phase, we dream. The REM sleep phase, by the way, is also called paradoxical sleep. Paradoxical sleep because when we look at the brain waves, so we talked about the EEG, the electroencephalograms, our brain waves look almost exactly as when we are awake. So just from looking at the results from the EEG, a scientist cannot determine whether we're awake or asleep in REM sleep phase because it looks the same. So this is why it's called paradoxical sleep, because it's really paradox. And so we dream in that stage, and we have very strange dreams usually in that stage. And by the way, whatever anyone tells you, scientists are not yet 100% sure why we dream and what happens when we dream. So the latest hypothesis, by the way, is that there is no meaning in our dreams, but our brain is firing away, and then our prefrontal cortex is trying to make sense out of it. And that's how dreaming happens. Isn't it interesting? So again, there is a lot of things that have not been uncovered yet when we talk about sleep. Now we talked about the REM sleep, and I said there is another phase that's called the non-REM sleep. There is a slow wave sleep and then a light sleep, and both are called non-REM sleeps. And so usually in the slow wave sleep, when you look at the EEG, then you would see that large group of neurons are fired together in a more synchronous and rhythmic pattern. And in REM sleep, it's much more complex and much more crazy. Now, the sleep phases, they don't happen in a regular linear way. So usually you fall asleep, there is light sleep, then you go deep into the non-REM sleep. And at the onset of sleep, at the start of your night, you have more non-REM sleep, more deep sleep, more slow wave sleep. And then you get some REM sleep, you get some non-REM sleep again, some light sleep, and this happens and oscillates. And you even have some waking phases during your night that you're not aware of. And so the sleep cycle overall usually is about 90 minutes, but that's very simplified. When you think about your well-being, when you think about health, there are really 3 things that you can do for your body. That's the nutrition, that's activity, exercising, training, and sleep. And when you think about how long you can go without nutrition, you can go weeks without nutrition as long as you have enough water. You can go your entire life without exercising. Wouldn't be a really nice life, but you can. With sleep, you cannot. You cannot go without sleep for a long period. And also the interesting thing is that I always considered sleep like a waste of time. Like I wanted to extend my waking hours, and I thought sleep was really, it was needed, but not really productive. And when we look into the research, it's actually the other way around. Researchers now think that sleep is really the natural state of every being. And there is no life on earth that doesn't sleep. And so every single organism sleeps. And actually, the hypothesis now is that every being sleeps as much as life allows. Life being eating, nutrition, and reproduction. And when you look at sleeping through those eyes, so sleep is actually maybe our natural state, and the awake phase is actually what is reduced as much as possible if an organism is left on its own. So those were some facts about sleep and sleep deprivation. And I hope you will get your 7 to 8 hour sleep this night. And for those of you who are on my email list, with this week's email, you will have gotten a little freebie, which is a sleep assessment for your mornings. So a little sheet where you can capture how well you slept during night and also capture what your mood is and so on. And then next week, you will get an assessment sheet, like a little tracker for your evenings. And with both, if you're doing that, if you're tracking it for about 2 to 3 weeks, you will have a great insight into your sleep quality. And that's a great starting point because, as you know, it's always important to first benchmark where you are to then determine where you wanna and can go. So this was it for today. Thank you very much. And may you always lead well and also sleep well. Bye for now.
This was Lead Well. Now, what is the one thing that you're taking away from this episode? Please share in the comments below and do share the podcast with your friends and family, but only if you like it.